Welcome to the 772nd Ordinary Council meeting. I declare this meeting open at 10:01. I would like to advise meeting attendees that this meeting is being webcasted and audio recorded. In response to the public health emergency involving COVID-19, this meeting will be physically closed to the public. I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we are gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge the theme of National Reconciliation Week, which is In This Together. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, please be also advised that this live stream will contain the name of a person who has passed away. I would like to warmly welcome all members of our virtual public gallery who are watching this meeting via live stream. The resolutions Council is making will appear on your screen. However, I also encourage those watching today to follow along by reading the Ordinary Council agenda, which is available for viewing and downloading on Council's website. Please be upstanding if you are able, and join me in a moment of contemplation. Religion is, in reality, living. Our religion is not what we profess or what we say or what we proclaim. Our religion is what we do, what we desire, what we seek, what we dream about, what we fantasize, what we think. All these things 24 hours a day. One religion then is one's life, not merely the ideal life, but the life that is actually lived. Religion is not a prayer, it is not a church, it is not theistic, it is not atheist, has little to do with what people call religion. In every act, if we tromp on a bug, that is our religion. If we experiment on living animals, that is our religion. If we cheat at cards, that is our religion. If we dream of being famous, that is our religion. If we gossip maliciously, that is our religion. If we are rude and aggressive, that is our religion. All that we do and are is our religion. Thank you. Sit. Leave of absence. We have no leave of absence to record. Condolences. Are there any condolences that councillors wish to raise? Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish condolences be forwarded to the Adamson family on the passing of Beatrice Adamson from Cornubia. She was 102 when she passed away last month, so condolences please be passed on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. That will be recorded. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Today we recognise sorry business in our community. Reginald Roy Rocks, or Uncle Reg as he was known, left behind the love of his life, Bev, daughter Missy and his beloved grandchildren. Uncle Reg was born in 1934 in Toomala and spent his first years there until his tribe was moved onto the east coast. They were the last tribe to actually be moved. He was never educated past grade 4, although he had to stay in school until he was 15 years of age. Despite the challenges that he faced in his young life, he knew that education was the key to success and encouraged every child not only to attend school but to soak up the lessons they had. He lived most of his adult life right here in Woodridge, and I have the privilege of saying I knew Uncle Reg. I had cuppas at his table and I laughed with him and Auntie Bev, with Missy and his grandchildren Cohen, Georgia and Leroy. He was a warm, giving and generous man, a great artist who actually was commissioned to perform artwork for Pope John Paul II. But if you ask Reggie, his greatest artwork was Scrubby Creek, or something that he did at a local school with young children. He put a story to every piece of artwork and he brought the children along with him. He encouraged them to learn Indigenous history. He was a Kumulori man and he knew the language and spoke it well, and he passed that knowledge on to his children and his grandchildren, who I'm sure will share it with the rest of the wider Australia. Uncle Reggie was a giving and generous and humble man, and he will be sorely missed. Rest in peace, Reggie.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. That will be recorded. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to ask that condolences be passed on to the Jensen family for the passing of Jim on Anzac Day this year. Jim was a massive member of the local community. He participated for decades in volunteers and policing, and he was the president of the Bird Breeders Association until, unfortunately, his ailing health stopped him from actually giving back to the community that he loved. He'll be greatly missed by the people in Logan Lee and now Waterford West, where his wife Marge still lives and gives me a hard time every week making sure that council's doing its job. So thank you, and I'd ask that condolences be passed on to his family.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. That will be recorded. Do we have any other condolences? No? Councillors, please stand if you're able to join me in a moment of reflection as we honour those who have gone before us and support of those who have been left behind. Thank you, councillors. You may sit. Councillors, we have no congratulations to report or consider. Do any councillors have any matters they would like to discuss regarding congratulations? Councillor Bradley?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could congratulations just be recorded in the minutes, please, for Faye and Ray Kerr of Rochedale South? I've actually personally gone there and congratulated them, as have you, Mr Mayor, on their 50th wedding anniversary earlier this month. So could that just be recorded in the minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. That will be recorded. Councillor Lane?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Big congratulations to John and Ray Crimmin of Logan Central. They celebrated 60 years on the 7th of May, and I know that you sent them a certificate of well wishes, and I dropped that around to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. That will be recorded. Councillor Russell?
None at this time. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kransky?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, all you need is love. As we know, Corona-19 has hit our community hard, but if there's one thing we know about living in Logan, it is how valuable our community spirit is. Mr Mayor, I'd like congratulations to be forwarded to Principal Dan Walker on behalf of Canterbury College for their inaugural magnificent wellbeing project. Families took to their screens during social isolation to sing, dance and play instruments from the comfort of their own homes to create a very unique celebration of community. With research showing that the arts can be a positive influence on a person's wellbeing, this was the perfect project to help lift our community spirits. Councillors, if you haven't already, I encourage you to visit Canterbury's YouTube channel for their very special rendition of the Beatles classic, All You Need Is Love, a poignant reminder of what's important during these challenging times, guaranteed to make your spirits soar. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Councillor Raven?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and a hard act to follow when all you need is love, but I'd like to ask that congratulations be forwarded to Barbara Seslak. She's a resident in Marsden who's recently been awarded the Queensland Police Service Logan Volunteer of the Year for the time that she spends as a VIP. That's a volunteer in policing for those playing at home. But more than that, she does so much for our community. She's a JP, she's involved in Neighbourhood Watch, and even during the COVID-19 restrictions, when people have desperately needed paperwork signed because the law does not stop while the virus continues, she's made sure that she could still support those people in witnessing documents and doing so in a safe and socially distanced manner. So I'd like to ask that congratulations be forwarded to her for her great work.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Councillor Hall?
None at this time, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Fraser?
None at this time, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hirameyer.
None at this time, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bannon.
None at this time, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Stemp.
None at this time, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to pass on my congratulations to Ken and Beth of Greenbank, who recently celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary during the COVID restrictions. So I pass on my congratulations to them.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Murphy.
None at this time, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. I now draw your attention to the confirmation of the minutes of the 13th post-election meeting held on the 29th of April 2020. Can we have this confirmed? Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Bradley has seconded the motion. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? No? I now open the floor to the vote. All those in favour, please cast their hands. That has been carried unanimously. The motion has been carried. Business arising from the minutes. We have no business arising to consider. I now go to the committee recommendations. I now refer to the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting dated the 19th of May 2020. Councillor Raven, Chairperson of the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that we have a conflict of interest for item 5.2. Before we move into discussion, do any councillors have any further conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, I'd now like to call for discussions on the recommendations with the exception of item 5.2.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Do any councillors wish to speak on any of the recommendations with the exclusion of item 5.2?
Mr Mayor, if I could, with your indulgence, I'd like to speak on two items. The first is item 5.1 and the second is a GB item that you raised. Item 4.1 is in relation to the economic development strategy and vision for the City of Logan. Councillors, this strategy will be a deep dive into the Logan economy, which provides a strong basis to prepare a new economic vision for the City of Logan. This strategy will reimagine Logan's future with a focus on jobs, investment and local wealth. Now is the time to start this process, and the staff have been working readily in the background to have this ready for us for the first council meeting. We have a new council with fresh eyes, and while our economy and our community are feeling the impacts of COVID-19, we can harness the recovery from these challenging times as a catalyst to reinvigorate our city's economy. The early work suggests that economic development in Logan needs to be more inclusive. Economic growth must be built from within to withstand business strength, as well as attract globally orientated businesses with strong local supply chains. Locally owned businesses are far more likely to be committed to the local area and retain wealth from within the city, create local economic multipliers and bring greater social returns and build long-lasting prosperity for our community. This will not be an economic development strategy for Logan City Council. This is an economic development strategy for the City of Logan, for the people of Logan and for the businesses that make up its economy. Councillors, I thank you for your support and encourage the community, especially the business community and its leaders, to support us to create meaningful change for the people that we represent. Mr Mayor, I'd like to invite anyone else who wants to speak to the economic development strategy to do so now. Excellent. I'll move straight on to the GB item that you raised, Mr Mayor, and thank you for raising that. It's an important moment in our electoral cycle when we have our first council meeting, and you've brought straight to the table one of your strongest commitments, which was to make sure that the Logan planning scheme of 2015 is reviewed with input from all the councillors. I know last term one of the biggest struggles that we had was that some councillors, myself included, felt that we weren't involved in the process, and so we found it hard to explain the decisions that were impacting on our community when they were to the detriment of our community. Through this process, all councillors will be engaged, and I'm glad to tell you that the Economic Development team has already got a timeline rolled out, so as soon as next week, you'll be expected to put forward your ideas. So call out to your community, your constituents, and find out what they expect from you and what we can deliver in this amendment, because it's very important for the future of our city. I have nothing further to add, Mr Mayor, and I open the floor to my fellow councillors.
I might comment on this. The planning scheme is important for our future, but it was also the most identified concern in the public during the last election. In many forums, it was discussed with many residents concerned about the future of the city and how we're exposed with overdevelopment with little infrastructure. I have spoken to the director about also the concern about stormwater. Stormwater was an issue that was identified during the campaign as a concern. This will also be under examination through the process. But also, I want to highlight the fact that each councillor will be interviewed about their planning scheme in their division. This is where you are going to have the opportunity to have ownership of your plan in your division, because the last thing I want to see is councillors voting against the planning scheme, which is not a good look, and it also divides the council. I am aware there will be constraints with state planning policy, but this will also give you an opportunity to educate yourself on those processes and give you the ability to lobby the state government if you're not happy or your residents are not happy with those provisions under the state planning policy. So I thank councillors for your support on this, and thank you, Councillor Raven, and I'll push it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I now move that the recommendations of the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting, with the exception of item 5.2, be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Do we have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Bradley seconds the motion. I now put it to the floor. All those in favour, please cast your hands. Thank you. That has been carried unanimously. I'm now aware of a conflict of interest. Councillor Bradley has declared a conflict of interest. They've indicated and they propose... Sorry.
Councillor Wilcox.
Sorry, Councillor Wilcox has declared a conflict of interest in this matter. They've indicated they propose to stay in and participate in the meeting. In accordance with Section 175E of the Local Government Act 2009, you must now decide if Councillor Wilcox has a perceived or real conflict of interest. Provide the reason for your decision and also determine if they are free to participate in the meeting while the matter is discussed, including by voting on the matter, or should leave the meeting. Firstly, we will vote on the motion that Councillor Wilcox has a perceived conflict of interest. Is there a mover for the motion? Councillor Raven has moved the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Bradley has seconded the motion. I'll put it to the vote. That has been carried unanimously. We now... Sorry? We will allow it to speak. Yep. Sorry, we've got to ask Councillor Wilcox the reasoning for her perceived conflict.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I, Natalie Wilcox, declare a perceived conflict of interest in relation to item 5.2 of the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee due to the following reason. The previous house I owned with my husband in Greenbank for 12 years has recently been granted a Land for Wildlife member title. I have spoken with and formed a friendship with the new owner, Sharon Rosinski, and with my old neighbour, Sharon Webster, who lives opposite my old house and who also has a Land for Wildlife member title on her property. The nature of the relationship is acquaintances and friends with both of these ladies. And I have determined that this is a personal interest and it is not of sufficient significance that it will lead me to making a decision on the matter that is contrary to the public interest. I will best perform my responsibility in serving the overall public interest of the whole of the council's area by participating in the discussion and voting on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. I will now put the motion up again. Can I have a motion? Can I have someone carry the motion that Councillor Wilcox has a perceived conflict of interest? Councillor Raven has moved the motion and Councillor Bradley has seconded the motion. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Karansky, are you voting?
I don't believe that Councillor Wilcox has any conflict of interest with regard to this item.
So I've put it up to that. It's been carried that Councillor Wilcox has perceived. Councillor Karansky has not voted for that perceived. So you're voting against that?
I am, Mr Mayor.
It's been recorded that you recorded against that. I now move the motion that Councillor Wilcox can still stay in the meeting. Can I have a motion? Councillor Raven has moved the motion that Councillor Wilcox can stay in the room. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Bradley has moved that motion. All those in favour? That has been carried unanimously. Councillor Wilcox can now stay and participate in item 5.2. I now push it back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reason that we believe Councillor Wilcox can stay in the room is because the nature of the conflict of interest is not significant enough to impact Councillor Wilcox's ability to vote in the public interest. Now that we've resolved that, Mr Mayor, I move that 5.2, the recommendations for item 5.2 of the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee be adopted.
Councillor Raven has moved the motion. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Stemp has seconded the motion. I now put it to the floor to vote. All those in favour? That's been carried unanimously. The motion has been carried. I now go to the City Infrastructure Committee. I now refer to the meeting held on the 19th of May. Councillor Lane, Chairperson of the City Infrastructure Committee, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just before I proceed, I'd just like to say that one of the biggest things that we notice on the roads every single day is a road crew that holds us up when we're trying to drive somewhere. And during COVID-19, we saw roads crews on the road, we saw wastewater and water crews on the road, and thank goodness for them. They keep the city moving and they keep working through these types of crises. So thank you very much to each of them. Mr Mayor, during the committee there were no conflicts of interest declared in the committee meeting. Before we move into discussion, do any councillors have any new conflicts of interest to declare on other items? And please advise of the item number only at this stage. There being none.
No, there's no further. So you now call for discussion.
Sorry, do any councillors wish to speak on this item?
With the exception of?
Sorry, I'm reading off a script, so I'm struggling in my first meeting.
Oh, sorry, there's no conflict. Sorry, you're right.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I now move that the recommendations of the City Infrastructure Committee meeting be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Do any other councillors wish to speak? There being no further speakers, Councillor Lane, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I now move the recommendations of the City Infrastructure Committee meeting be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. I now move the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bannon has seconded the motion. I now put it to the floor to vote. Those in favour? That has been carried unanimously. Thank you. Motion has been carried. I now refer to the City Governance Committee meeting held on the 20th of May. Councillor Bradley, Chairperson of the City Governance Committee, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note we have a conflict of interest in relation to item 8.1. Before we move into discussion, do any other councillors have any further conflicts of interest they wish to declare on any other items? Please advise of the item number only at this stage. There's no conflicts of interest. I now call for discussion on the recommendations with the exception of 8.1.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Do any councillors wish to speak on any of the recommendations with the exclusion of 8.1?
Okay.
There being no further speakers, Councillor Bradley, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wish to highlight 4.1 and 5.2. This is the first councillors were able to see effectively the books of the council since being elected as councillors for the City of Logan. I now wish to move the recommendations of the City Governance Committee meeting with the exception of 8.1.
Councillor Bradley has
be adopted.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Bradley has moved the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bannon has seconded the motion. I now put it to the floor. All those in favour? That has been carried unanimously. That motion has been carried.
Please note that my name has been marked as abstain for item 8.2.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. That will be recorded. I now refer to item 8.1 of the recommendations. Councillor Murphy, you have indicated you have a conflict of interest. Can you please provide the details?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I, Karen Murphy, declare that I have a perceived conflict of interest in item 8.1 of the City Governance Committee meeting due to the reason of, as being the past president of the Beenleigh-Yatala Chamber of Commerce, I supported Haunted Attractions J. Rose as director in an application to council, and a copy of this letter was with council. I also have a working relationship with J. Rose on many occasions as a quota member. I have also formed a relationship with Jay. The person involved in this conflict is J. Rose, and the nature of our relationship is a friendship. I do believe that I can make a decision in the best outcome for all parties.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Murphy has declared a conflict of interest. They have indicated they propose to stay and participate in the meeting. In accordance with Section 175E of the Local Government Act 2009, you must now decide if Councillor Murphy has a perceived or real conflict of interest, provide the reason for your decision, and also determine if they are free to participate in the meeting while the matter is discussed, including by voting on the matter, or should leave the meeting. Firstly, we will vote on the motion that Councillor Murphy has a perceived conflict of interest. Is there a mover for this motion? Councillor Karansky has moved the motion. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Fraser has seconded the motion. I now put it to the vote. That has been carried unanimously. I now raise whether or not Councillor Murphy can in fact stay and participate. I now open a motion that, councillors, I now open a motion that Councillor Murphy is free to participate in the meeting while this matter is discussed, including by voting on the matter. Is there a mover on the motion? Councillor Bannon has moved the motion. There is a seconder. Councillor Stemp has seconded the motion. I now put it to the floor for the vote. Those in favour? That has been carried unanimously. Councillor Murphy, you can participate and stay in the room. Yes, Councillor Raven.
Mr Mayor, the reason that we've determined that Councillor Murphy can remain in the room with a perceived conflict is that the report that she has a conflict with has no decision to be made. It's just calling for a future report so that there's no conflict of interest with anything in that.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Back to Councillor Bradley. Thank you. I now open discussion on item 8.1. Do any councillors wish to speak? Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I very much look forward to this report about the haunted attraction. I now move the item 8.1 of the recommendations of the City Governance Committee meeting be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Bradley has moved the motion. There is a seconder to the motion. Councillor Wilcox has seconded the motion. I now put it to the floor. The vote. That has been carried unanimously. That motion has been carried. Thank you. I now draw attention to the City Lifestyle Committee meeting held on the 20th of May 2020. Councillor Karansky, Chairperson of the City Lifestyle Committee, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that we have a conflict of interest for item 4.1. Before we move into discussion, do any other councillors have any further conflicts of interest they wish to declare on any other items? There being no further conflicts of interest, I now call for discussion on the recommendations with the exception of item 4.1.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, yes, Councillor Bradley.
I would like to talk on one of the items. Is that okay?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to speak on 5.1, the Logan Animal Ambulance sponsorship. Long ago, this actually came from the community, this suggestion, and so the community can be very proud of that our council is still supporting this initiative. So I just highly recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Any further discussion? No? Councillor Karansky.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I too would like to speak to item 5.1. This is a tremendous initiative of Logan City Council to partner up with the RSPCA, and it's certainly something that's hugely supported by our community. For those of you who don't know, the ambulance sponsorship agreement between Council and the RSPCA provides a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week service throughout the whole City of Logan. Logan's animal ambulance service is extremely popular with the community because it provides wildlife rescues for creatures great and small, all corners of the city. And it also provides an animal hospital service for those animals that are convalescing. Our partnership with the RSPCA means skilled and qualified staff are at the ready to lend their expertise for yet another year, and I'd like to commend councillors for supporting this valuable partnership.
Thank you, Councillor Karansky. Councillor Karansky, wish to proceed?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I now move that the recommendations of the City Lifestyle Committee, with the exception of item 4.1, be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Karansky. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Russell has seconded the motion. I now put it to the floor. All in favour? Those vote. That has been carried unanimously. The motion has been carried. I now refer to item 4.1 of the recommendation. Councillor Bradley, you have indicated you have a conflict of interest. Can you please provide those details?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I, Lisa Bradley, declare a perceived conflict of interest in relation to the item 7.1 of the City Lifestyle Committee meeting due to the following reason. During the recent local government election campaign, I was lobbied by Desley Scott in relation to one of the properties listed in the report. The name of the person is Desley Scott. She was a former state member for Woodridge, and she was representing on behalf of a non-government organisation. I have determined that this personal interest is not of sufficient significance, that it will lead me to making a decision on the matter that is contrary to the public interest. I'll best perform my responsibility of serving the overall public interest of the whole of the council's area by participating in the discussion and voting on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Bradley has declared a conflict of interest. They have indicated they propose to stay and participate in the meeting. In accordance with Section 175E of the Local Government Act 2009, you must now decide if Councillor Bradley has a perceived or real conflict of interest, provide the reason for your decision, and also determine if they are free to participate in the meeting while the matter is discussed, including by voting on the matter, or should leave the meeting. Firstly, we will vote on a motion that Councillor Bradley has a perceived conflict of interest. Is there a mover for the motion? There is no mover for the motion. I now put that, do we have a mover for the motion that Councillor Bradley has a real perceived conflict of interest, a real conflict of interest? No. I'm now looking for a mover to that Councillor Bradley has no conflict of interest. Councillor Raven has moved the motion. Councillor Hall has seconded the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Councillor has favoured that there is no conflict of interest. You may participate. Do I have a reason for that? Councillor Raven.
Yes, Mr Mayor, the property Councillor Bradley has referred to is not the subject of the report and only mentioned in the background papers. As such, there's no conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. That being the case now, Councillor Karansky, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I now move that item 4.1 of the recommendations of the City Lifestyle Committee be adopted.
Councillor Karansky has moved the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Hall has seconded the motion. I now put it to the floor for the vote. All those in favour? That has been carried unanimously. The motion has been carried. I now go to council reports. We have no council reports to consider. Late reports. We have one late report to consider. Before we open to discussion, do any councillors have a conflict of interest on this matter? No. I now call for open discussion on this matter. Does any councillors wish to discuss the matter? Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I raised this last council meeting about the acceptable requests guidelines, and just for the public's knowledge, this is basically how we operate as councillors within the organisation. I wish to thank everyone who's been involved. It actually will increase the efficiency of how councillors operate, and that actually helps the community. So these guidelines, acceptable request guidelines, basically highlights how we can ask for things within council and assist and serve the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Is there any further speakers? No, not being so. Now I'm looking for someone to move the motion. Councillor Bradley has moved. Councillor Karansky has seconded. I now put it to the floor. Those in favour? That has been voted unanimously. The motion has been carried. Thank you. We now go to the petitions. Is there any petitions to present? There are no petitions to present. I now go to consideration of notified motions. We have no notified motions to consider. I now go to general business. And as Chair, I will allow general business to proceed and we'll go in a divisional formula. So I'll start at Division 1. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very grateful to actually be able to speak in general business. If you can remember last term, it was very difficult to do so. I wish to also thank all councillors here and the staff involved. In the last couple of days, we've been going through the budget process, and you can see by the books on this table here, it's quite a lengthy process. So everyone has been participating, and I wish to thank everyone for their input so far. I do have a general business item to go up on the screen. For the members of the public, I'll read it out. The Director of Community Services be requested to prepare a report to the next City Lifestyle Committee detailing the extra costs of the Underwood Park redevelopment project, how assets will be rectified and their replacement, particularly pathways, planned rectification works to the nature play equipment, including steep slopes, along with feedback on the project management of this project. When I was last a councillor, the project actually was proceeding, and during the time of administration I had no idea what was going on. So I am actually grateful to the state member, Mick DeBrini, for keeping me informed. However, the plans definitely did change. And with that change, there have been a number of things that are now quite problematic. For example, there once was a 2-metre footpath that extended from Thunderwood Hollow all the way through to the front of where the netball clubhouse is now. During the works that have been undertaken, there is now a 1-metre footpath. So hence why I've actually stipulated that in the recommendation. Obviously that's going to be an issue with the park run. It's going to be an issue for anyone actually going to the park, because anyone with a wheelchair, a pram, forget about having someone next to you. Other things that have happened during the course of construction, the nature play area, I reported probably a year ago, some drainage issues as a result of the works. And since then, a section of that nature play area has been fenced off. That still needs to be rectified, hence that it has been mentioned in the report. There have been extra costs associated with the project. I understand that when you start doing any sort of redevelopment, things get uncovered that you're not aware of, but I really want this to be open and transparent, and obviously council also hasn't been project managing this particular project, so I would like to have the warts and all in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor
And
Bradley.
I move it, sorry.
So Councillor Bradley has moved the motion on the screen. Do I have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Raven has seconded the motion. Councillor Karansky, do you wish to speak?
I was merely seconding the motion.
Oh, you were beaten. I now put it to the floor to vote. Those in favour? That has been carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Lane.
I have no business at this moment.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, but none from me today.
Councillor Karansky.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No general business at this stage.
Councillor Raven.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I would like to raise some general business. Let me begin by saying thank you, and it's good to be back. Not just back in council, but back in general business. 2.5 years ago, you and Councillor Bradley were forced to leave the chamber with tape across your mouth because the Mayor at the time had prevented democratically elected representatives from speaking on behalf of their community. Now with the new council, we have a new beginning, and again, our voices can be heard. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all my colleagues for how well you've been working as a united team, and both through the difficult budget process that we're going through at the moment, but as well with your committee processes, dealing with conflicts of interest and all of the legislation that impacts on councillors. Finally, for the people at home, my kids have asked me to tell you that you have to subscribe, you have to like, and you have to click the little bell so that you can get the notifications of all the council casts that go up onto this YouTube channel, because that way you can stay abreast of what's going on in your council and how we're working for you. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have no order of business, but I would like to thank Mr Councillor Raven for his kind comments.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser.
I have no general business, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hirameyer.
Not at this time, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bannon.
Not at this time, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Stamp.
Not at this time, Mr Mayor.
Councillor...
Not at this time, Mr Mayor.
No. Councillor Murphy.
Not at this time, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Before I close the meeting, I'd like to make an announcement. As you probably have been aware, we were recently contacted by the state government to decide whether or not we wanted to change the public holiday. Now, there was a lot of consultation taking place, and I'm aware, well, I just want to state first that before I went through a consultation, I asked each and every one of the councillors whether or not they wished to proceed in consultation, whether or not we change that holiday, and each councillor gave permission, yes. During the process, that was on Facebook, there was a lot of consultation that took place. In fact, it was probably the most well-received social media event that has occurred, certainly on my Facebook. What I did notice, there was a flavour of support to change the day to the Friday. Councillor Bradley?
Into the eco public holiday, aren't you?
Public holiday, yeah, eco public holiday.
Thank you.
Yep. So the main concern, or well, basically main reason why people wanted to change the date was because that people work in Brisbane and they had a different holiday to their children who were schooling in Logan. So the general flavour was that they wished to support the move to the Friday. So as a result of that, I think we received, well, I certainly received, and what I ventured to see in the other community pages, at least 80 to 90% support to change the holiday to the Friday. As a result of this, I've requested that the acting CEO send a letter to the state government asking that the date be changed to the Friday. So that is on its way, and we're hoping to get a decision from the state government in the near future. So I just wanted to make that announcement that it's looking very likely that we will have Eco Day on the Friday, not on the Wednesday. But other than that, I'd like to now close the meeting. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.